What if your inner critic is actually the thing that helped you to succeed? I have 10 minutes. Let's talk about it. So, a coaching client this week said, Katie, I have gotten to the level of success that I have reached because of my inner critic, because of the critical voice that I hold. I am very hard on myself. I have always been very hard on myself. And it has been really effective in terms of getting me to the place of success financially and within business that I've gotten to at this point. I said, fair enough, right? I hear you. For as long as you can remember, that's a key sentence. For as long as you can remember, you've had a critical internal dialogue that has helped you to push the limits on what you may have believed is possible in terms of success, creating financial results, creating business results. And I think that's a fair declaration. And I think that any high performer watching this could relate to that in some way, shape, or form, right? That critical voice being the voice that pushes. It's the internal David Goggins, right? And it's why David Goggins' videos are so popular, is because it gets you fired up. Like, it really can motivate you in some instances. And the way that I responded to this particular client is I said, first of all, you weren't born this way. You weren't born critical towards the self. There are inherent qualities, inborn traits of discernment that can be in a baby or in a child, right? You'll have two different temperaments. One child is very observant, is observing the environment, is being discerning about the environment. The other may have less discernment, less observation. And so we call this level of risk tolerance, right? When we see this inborn in a child. However, none of us, not even me, was born with a critical internal voice and a critical relationship to self. That is learned. Now, how that's learned and how that's developed can take on a billion different ways, right? You may have learned it from mom. You may have learned it from dad. You may have not had mom and dad, so you learned it from a caretaker or the person that you spent the most time with. You may have not learned it until you were in middle school when somebody publicly criticized you, and then it became this way of speaking to yourself because you internalized that identity and you internalized the fear of even more criticism. So you leverage the criticism to manage your behavior and identity going forward from that point. It could have been a result of a traumatic experience. It could have been a result of you developing and internalizing shame, right? Around maybe the way that you looked or the way that you felt or the way that you were regarded by your peer group or by some teachers. There's so many ways that this can develop. And how it develops is not as significant as the fact that it exists, and acknowledging that the critical voice does exist. And here's my take on the critical voice. Number one, I told this client, look, you were not born this way. Maybe you have been this way for as long as you can remember, which is fair enough, depending on how far back your memory goes. But the second thing is, if you've been this way your whole life, and by whole life, I mean as far back as you can remember, then do you have proof that it is the best strategy for your highest level of expression and your greatest level of success? Can you honestly say that you have proof for that? And this client looked at me and paused and started to chew on that a little bit. And I'd like you to chew on it too, if you have the space to, because that's an important key, right? Do I know? Do I actually know that this is the most effective thing? And if I do know that this is the most effective thing, how long did I trial something else? And what did I trial besides this strategy of being critical, being cruel, right? The sort of the internalized self-hate as a way of having the word that gets used is edge, right? In air quotes, having an edge. And I offer this because I'm not saying that you need to be overly nice to yourself, right? I don't think that if you have an internalized critical voice and you have really normalized this relationship to self that is very harsh, that is very David Goggins, right? I'm not saying that you swing far and hard in the opposite direction immediately. right? And say, oh, well, that's okay. You did your best, right? It's get them next time. That's fine. I feel like that's the voice that people hear when I suggest and offer the idea of letting that, transforming that internal critic. My actual offering is, can you be honest? Can you be honest and can you be neutral? Because there is a distinction between being critical, being discerning, and being judgmental, right? And criticism and judgment often get like woven in together, and discernment gets lost in the sauce. We need discernment, right? Especially when we are creating something very specific or we have a goal in mind, right? If I am painting a blue sky, then I need to be able to discern between the blue paint and the red paint and the purple paint and the yellow paint and the green paint, because I am painting a blue sky. So I got to have that discernment, right? If I am out here and I'm looking for great employees, I need to have discernment about the qualities for this role, about the characteristics for this role, right? And so that discernment is so important, and that discernment does not have to live in a critical context. It can live as a neutral way of honoring the goal and what you're going to need to get to that goal and to create it and achieve it. So if you're looking at a bunch of colored pencils or a bunch of paint and you go, I'm painting a blue sky and I need blue paint, there's a lot of neutrality there. It's not mean. It's not like, you're the worst color blue and every other color blue is great. You know what I mean? Like, you're failing, you're falling behind in the blues. Like, that's none of that. It's a very neutral, I need blue. I'm going to get blue. There's no charge to it. It's a very clean, and that's what I offer to you in this space is, yeah, criticism works for a period of time. It really, really does. Criticism works to go from not so great to great. However, if you are going from great to fantastic and fantastic to limitless, criticism and self-hatred won't actually sustain you there, because it literally is like housing a self-defeating parasite, where if you continue to host this toxic, critical, self-hating way of being with yourself, then you can't actually live honestly in who you are. And the honesty in who you are, and the ability to be authentic, and the ability to be true to yourself and to others, is what will create the fulfillment that most people who are going from great to even greater or great to limitless are actually seeking. Because once you hit great, it's not about money anymore. Once you hit great, it's not about how much weight do I need to lose. It's not about survival. It's not about paycheck to paycheck. It's not about, the money has become as easy as, breathing air, or, putting your shoes on, or it's become just a part of what you do, right? But the part of what you do is you make money, and there's an ease there. So you're not focused on that anymore. And in the same breath, you've realized that fulfillment doesn't come from that anyway. And that's not to discredit the presence of resources, because money is a resource, and it's a very important resource. And it is a resource that carries with it a lot of opportunity and a lot of possibility for creation. However, to sustain that creation from a place and a beingness of fulfillment, I offer that you shelve the inner critic and the self-hatred for 6 months to a year, and you start learning the language of honesty with yourself. You start learning the language of honesty rooted in kindness, in the same way that you would speak to a young child that you loved and respected, right? I am not going to tell my child, oh, don't worry, honey, it's okay. Go ahead and be, do whatever you want to do. There's no rules. There's no limits. Like, I'm not going to tell my child that, because that creates an unsafe environment for my child. I am going to tell my child, you can run in this area here, as much as you want and as fast as you want, but you cannot run in the street, and you cannot ride a bike without your helmet, and you cannot ride your scooter without shoes, because I want you to have all your toes intact and I want your head protected in case you fall, right? Those are ways of implementing honest, honest boundaries, honest parameters, setting the context so that there is a freedom that can happen while also being aware of the protection that's needed. And that's what the honest inner dialogue sounds like. It sounds like, yes, push yourself in this area. And also, if you are feeling fatigued, you don't get to quit, but you do need to go take a break. You do need to drink your water, and you do need to eat healthy, and you do need to get your movement, right? Because that honest inner dialogue is not enabling. Because enabling also falls into the category of self-hatred. So I'm offering this to you as a consideration of trying it on. If you have lived with self-hatred and you have lived with the inner critic for as long as you can remember, or even for the last decade, right? And you have this fear of, well, what if I stop being this way with myself and I lose my ambition? That was one of my fears early on. I lose my ambition and I no longer have a drive, and I, won't have the pressure that pushes me. And it's like, well, maybe you won't have the pressure that pushes you anymore, but maybe you'll have the fuel in your engine that keeps you moving forward without you having to kill yourself in the process, without any health concerns, without jeopardizing your most beloved relationships, without alienating you from your family, without feeling lonely every step of the way, right? Like, these are the things that are available when we can entertain the idea that maybe there is a better option than the self-criticism and the self-hatred that we've known most of our lives. So go forward, be great, go beyond, and I'll talk to you later.